Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Stephen King podcast after a bit of a layoff because I was out for surgery, and I'm back. I'm back on both legs. It's been 5 weeks after my knee replacement, my first one, and it's going really well. So, Hans, it's good to be back, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm more worried about you, and I've been doing some misery jokes on you with your leg and everything, but I guess you survived all right.
I did. It's been pretty rapid too. Like I've gone from a walker to crutches to a cane to nothing like within a span of 3 weeks or so. So, I mean, I'm not 100% yet, but definitely can tell the difference between my good leg and my bad leg. I don't know when I'm going to get the next one done, but it did cause a bit of a break between episodes of the podcast. And I hope that everybody is going to be gratified by what we give you in this one, because there's a lot of news, and we were contacted by one of our listeners. Ami Sandler contacted us about talking about Stephen King comics, which we've never really talked about before, right, Hans?
Yeah, that will be interesting to hear. I think there's a lot to talk about there. Going to be a cool introduction to people who hasn't read any comics so far.
Right, and it's not something that we've really discussed in any detail before. So it was a fun interview, and I was really glad that Ami brought that suggestion forward to us. So look forward to that after the news.
Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room.
Yes, and first out is some great news. We have a new Stephen King story that we didn't know about. It's a story called Laurie, and it's actually totally free over at Stephen King's website. And we're not going to say too much about it because we are going to review it in an upcoming episode. So your homework, dear listeners, is to head over to Stephen King's website, read the story, comment on it, and then we'll talk more about it.
That's right. And it's got quite the bite to it, so watch out. Up next, we've already got The Outsider, has been released, of course, and I think by now, this is June 10th. I think most people have probably read it. If you're a rabid Stephen King fan, pretty sure that you've read it, but it's hard to tell how big some people's reading pile is, but we've got that, and now we're looking forward to his second book that's coming out later this year called Elevation, and you can read an excerpt of it over at Entertainment Weekly. And the main character has an interesting name, Scott Carey, who, if you know your Richard Matheson at all, is a character that he wrote in the story called The Shrinking Man. And this is interesting in another way because we've just done another interview with Stephen Spignesi that will be coming out in the following podcast. And he mentions Stephen King talking about how big of an influence Richard Matheson was on him. So it looks like that influence is continuing with this new story called Elevation.
Yeah, we got the cover for it, the UK cover, which I think is very interesting. It's a mailbox with the elevation printed on it, and the second E is floating away up in space. So that's, I guess, a connection to the plot if you read the plot line. What's interesting is that elevation is on a mailbox.
Yes.
That has me wondering a little bit.
And it's interesting because the other cover, which I don't know if that's going to be the American one or if that's just a placeholder, it kind of looks like fireworks in the night sky, which might be from the other story. What was that story about the fireworks called again?
Yeah, I think everyone knows what you mean, right?
Yeah, I hope so. Sorry, guys. But
yeah, we'll blame your leg for this.
Yeah, I'm still recovering. I didn't have time to do all my research, but because it just struck me as I was looking at it, because I thought, oh, that's a nebula, and I said, no, that looks more like fireworks, but maybe it is a nebula. I don't know. Maybe it's just.
Well, it's the US cover anyway, so.
Is that for sure?
They did one with, I think it was just like blue with stars on it.
Right.
But now this one with more color is confirmed for the finished cover.
I don't know which one I like better. That's interesting.
Yeah. They both definitely raise some questions about the plot.
Yes, and there's still one more story about Elevation, and that's the updated plot description, which just came out June 7th. And basically it says that it's about finding common ground despite deep-rooted differences. I wonder what could have given him the inspiration for that idea.
Yeah.
And it sounds a little bit plot-wise, it sounds reminiscent of Stephen King's earlier novel, Thinner, in that the main character, Scott Carey, is losing weight, but he's not getting thinner. And the registers register the same, the scales, when he is in his clothes or out of them, no matter how heavy they are. So...
Yep.
And then he has new neighbors, and apparently this is supposed to be an uplifting story. So I don't know if that's just a play on the title or if it's the actual theme of the story as well. It's likely both, but I'm looking forward to it, and it's another Castle Rock story as well.
Yeah, and will be fairly short. I think Amazon has it listed like 140 pages or something like that. So
okay.
It'll be shorter than we're used to, but it's a new Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
And the next news is about another Stephen Spignesi. Is that how he's pronounced the name?
Yep.
Yep. And he's written, as you probably know, a lot of books about Stephen King in the past. And I mean, he wrote the first book I read about Stephen King. But now he's back with a book called Stephen King, American Master. And it's a book that has interviews, essays, and other things from fans and influences on Stephen King. And I actually have an essay in it that is called Being a Stephen King Fan, Not Easy, but Oh So Rewarding.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, that will be interesting. And as I mentioned, he's written books about King since 1990s, and he was the one who wrote the first book I read. So it's an honor to be included in this book, for sure.
Very cool. Yeah, and Steve will be, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, on our next podcast. We interviewed him, and he's got quite a few great interviews in that book, and including one with Richard Matheson, as I mentioned. So back from 1980s. So that will be very cool to read as well.
Yeah.
All right. So switching gears, moving over to the adaptation side of things. We have a premiere date for season 2 of Mr. Mercedes.
Yes.
It is August 22nd. And also has a teaser for the second season, and it reveals some interesting things. I was particularly struck by the graveyard scene or cemetery scene with Bill Hodges and Brady dressed up in his, I guess it's his ice cream uniform, all white. So, but we know that Brady's in a coma in the hospital. So it looks like one of the ways they're going to incorporate Brady into the season is to have him talking to Bill during scenes outside the hospital, much like they did with Dexter and his father, Harry, in that TV series. So what do you think of it? Think of it, Hans?
Well, it looks interesting. It's hard to tell how they're going to do the second season, because it looks like they are skipping Finders Keepers or just using parts of it and moving on to End of Watch. I can see why they do it, but I'm a little bit disappointed if they skip the plot of Finders Keepers, because I think that's a very good plot.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see how they do this once it airs. I read today actually on Instagram that they had wrapped shooting on it today. So I guess they're going to clip it so that it will be finished for August.
Right.
Yep.
Oh, we'll see. I do get the feeling that they're skipping Finders Keepers. So they could just maybe be rearranging the order of the books too. But, and I wonder, depending on the reception of the second season, are they looking at doing further seasons, maybe of new material? It's hard to say.
Yeah. We don't know anything about that. So that'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, The remake of Pet Sematary is moving along, and I think I said last time we talked about this that I was still very skeptical about if it would finally happen. But as it looks now, it is actually happening, because now we're hearing some casting. Jason Clarke has been cast as Louis Creed. John Lithgow has been cast as Judd Crandall, and Amy Semitis as Rachel Creed. So there's been some casting done for that one, and it has a release date that is April next year, I think. So I guess this one is happening. And do you have any thoughts about the cast?
Well, I think the big one that catches my eyes is, of course, whoever had to play Judd Crandall has big shoes to fill. But Fred Gwynne is the iconic role out of that first movie, and he just nailed that role. And Jonathan Lithgow is a fantastic actor. You know, if you saw him in so many movies, and Nightmare on 20,000 Feet remake for the Twilight Zone movie, I think he's a fantastic pick for this character. Jason Clarke, we've known from the recent Planet of the Apes movies.
Yeah.
So he's a solid actor. The female actor, Amy Siemens. Sorry, Amy, for saying that wrong. It sounds like cements, I think, but I'm not sure. She was in the last Alien movie, so I don't really know her that well. But one of your fans on your site said that she's an excellent actress, so that bodes well.
Yeah.
So it's definitely getting top-notch treatment as far as the casting goes. So I don't think I've heard who's been cast yet as the kids, and I think that will be coming later.
Yeah.
Obviously, whoever plays the boy will be vital to the power of the movie. So it'll probably be, well, it'll be an unknown, obviously, but that role will be vital to the success of the movie.
Definitely.
But it looks like a top-notch production. So I'm expectations and hopes have risen with these casting announcements.
Yeah, and then playing Judd Crandall is definitely going to be hard, because that's a role that a lot of people like. So John Lithgow definitely has his hands full, but I think he could pull it off, and I think that. Well, I think it might be similar to the Pennywise discussions that we had with the original and the new one. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I have hopes for it. I think he could pull it off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this next piece is a bittersweet. Good news on the front that it looks like the Lawn Walk is finally going to be coming to the screen, or is potentially coming to the screen. I mean, and as always with these announcements, they're just talking about writing the script at this point, and that's a long ways away from getting in front of the cameras. And Hollywood Reporter is reporting that writer James Vanderbilt is writing the screenplay, which surprised me when I first heard it, but apparently Frank Darabont has let the rights lapse on The Long Walk, which I really find surprising.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Hans? Because he was really hot to make this story.
Yeah. Well, I actually I wasn't very happy when I read this, because this is one of my favorite books. It's definitely in my top 5, top 3, top 1 for some days. I think it would take a lot to make this one work as a movie, and I think someone like Frank Darabont, or someone who really respects King's work, would have to do it to make it work. And I'm not saying that the people doing it now doesn't respect King's work. They might do very well, but I don't know. I might prefer that this one actually didn't happen. I think it might be better if it didn't happen.
Well, again, whatever happens with this, if it gets made, the story will always be there. The book will always be there. So if it's a bad adaptation, it's a bad adaptation. Hopefully it's not. And if it is, somebody else will retry it later on and do a good one. So
yeah,
I'm open for it happening, see what they can do with it. So
yeah, well, can only keep our fingers crossed.
Yep.
The next one is actually TV again, and it is the Castle Rock TV show now has a premiere date.
Yippee.
It will premiere on July 25th, which is just a little more than a month away now, on Hulu. They will actually premiere with the first 3 episodes all at once. So on July 25th, you will be able to see episode 1, 2, and 3. So, and then after that, it's 1 episode a week for the rest of the season, which will be 10 episodes. So, but I guess they will. The reason I think they give us 3 episodes all in one is I guess they want to give us a chance to get to know the characters, the town, what is it all about faster, so that we will be hooked on it.
Yeah, I agree. They're just setting up the premise and the context of the series, and with those first 3 episodes, and they'll probably close on the 3rd episode with some real major hook that will make you viewers want to watch the rest of the series. So
yeah,
the trailers look good. Yeah. I mean, it's only a trailer. You can't judge a series by a trailer, but I'm definitely interested. And I think there was, I don't know if we have this in the news notes, but there was a interview where the showrunners were saying that the show can go in a lot of directions, but at first season is going to be focused more on the town of Castle Rock than going out too far into Stephen King mythology. So whatever they've got this season, they put a box around it, which I think is good, because as we know, there's so much Stephen King material that you could potentially jump into out of this series that it might end up becoming more than what viewers can take in at once. So I think what you want to do is really establish this town and the characters, throw in a couple of Stephen King things, but just keep it pretty tight for this season and get people really hooked on it. And hopefully that's what we're going to see.
Yeah. And I think the fact that they are releasing 3 episodes at once, I think this is something we're going to see more about now, with Netflix releasing whole seasons at once. And I usually say that you have to see like 3 or 4 episodes in a series to be able to judge if it's something you want to continue to watch. And I think by releasing 3, they're giving you the chance to see these 3 episodes and get into the show.
Right.
So I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yep, I agree. And this one, more Netflix adaptations of Stephen King material, but this time it's something that he did with Joe Hill, which is The Tall Grass. And I got to admit, I forgot about this story, even though I sent it to you, Hans, because this was like 2 days after my surgery, and I was in La La Land for the rest of that week. So this slipped by me. It says that James Marsden is in negotiations to star, and if you don't know who he is, he played Cyclops in the X-Men movies, and he's also recently in the Westworld series that's on. So they're going to begin production this summer, and in Toronto, which has become like the alternate main for Stephen King stories, I think. And yeah, we had split feelings on this short story. Really loved the first half of the story, and then thought the second half of the story fell apart.
Yeah.
Do you remember that, Hans? Do you agree with that? Or
I remember this one was released in 2 parts in, I think it was Esquire magazine. They actually felt very different, these 2 parts, in both storytell and plot wise. And I definitely loved the first one, but felt that the other didn't really keep things together. So it will be interesting to see how they filmed this. I mean, it's quite gruesome as well, so it'll be interesting to see how they turn it into a movie.
For sure.
Yeah, and we don't know when that will happen, but Netflix is pretty quick in doing their movies and getting them out. So hopefully it won't take too long.
Yeah, probably next year, I would imagine.
Yeah,
next summer.
Yeah. Next one is also about a movie. The Gingerbread Girl is supposed to be filmed and released by and distributed by Brainstorm Media. I personally have never heard about them, but this was reported during the film festival in Cannes. Will be including Craig R. Baxley. Been involved with other King TV shows, Storm of the Century, Rose Red, right? I think they say casting is underway. I guess we'll see. There's so often stuff like this reported and nothing happens, so I guess we'll have to wait and see if this really happens.
Yeah, I can't see this being released theatrically, but I would assume it would end up on Netflix or something like that.
Yeah, it feels more like a TV movie.
Yeah, which is perfect for a lot of King's material, right?
Yeah.
It's a good story too. I really enjoyed it. So
yeah,
hopefully it will turn out to be something worthy of watching.
Yep.
All right, where are we now? How much news is left? Okay. It Part 2 is gearing up, and we're getting more announcements about the cast. We're pretty solid on Jessica Chastain, old age disease. He plays Professor X in the younger version, and he was in that M. Night Shyamalan movie. The I'm gonna have to look this up.
We have to Google.
Yeah, this is bad. This is bad. I can see the guy. McAvoy. James McAvoy. James McAvoy. I'm slowly getting back into shape here on the podcast. James McAvoy. Yeah. Bill Hader. Now we have announcements of Grown Up Eddie, who's being played by James Ransone, who is best known for work on, if you've watched the Hulu series or the Amazon Prime series Bosch, which is based on the Michael Connelly series of books. He was in he had a guest stint in that series for about a season, and he was good. He should be a solid choice. The next one, Hans. Do you know this guy at all? Joe Ryan? Jay Ryan?
No.
Oh.
No. I don't know him. I'm sorry.
I don't either.
I haven't seen him in anything, so this will be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Let's see his IMDb page, what he's been in.
I think based on his look, he would work very well as a big grown-up Ben.
Yeah, he was in Terra Nova, Legend of the Seeker, Go Girls, Top of the Lake, Mary Kills People, Fighting Season. Oh, that's in post-production. I guess that hasn't come out yet, so... I was also in Beauty and the Beast TV series. It must have been the remake version, I guess. That was out a couple of years. That was okay. So he's done mostly young adult teen stuff. So that's probably is a big break for him. He's a New Zealand-born and actor who then grew up in Australia. So another one of those one of those Australian actors striking out. A lot of people were hoping for Chris Pratt, but I mean. That's a lot of money probably that he would have been asking for since he's so popular right now with Guardians and Jurassic World. So I don't know.
Yeah. So grown-up Ben might have an accent, Australian accent.
He might. Depends how good the guy is on hiding his accent. I don't know. But Australians seem to be able to do that pretty good. So.
Yeah. I think he will work that up away.
Right. And there's another casting announcement that just was released just in the last couple of days for Mike, right? And that is the Old Spice guy, Isaiah Mustafa.
Yes, I actually haven't seen him in anything either, so...
Old Spice commercials? No? Don't you remember?
No.
Okay. You looked them up. I'm sure people here in North America know who I'm talking about. I'm a man on a horse. Okay.
Okay. Well, they might not have come here to Sweden.
No, maybe not. Just look up some Old Spice commercials. But I haven't seen him in a lot else. But it's an interesting choice because following the book, Mike's not in the story a lot because of something that happens. But I wonder how they're going to do that because the character that does that to him looked pretty dead in the first movie. So.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how they solve that problem.
So,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Moving along, a new release date has actually been announced, and this time it's about the Doctor Sleep movie. And it's Mike Flanagan who actually confirmed this to me, that the Doctor Sleep movie will premiere January 24th, 2020.
Wow.
So we have a couple of years, no, not 2 years, left until it will premiere, but I guess that's an indication that it's actually happening.
Yeah.
But it's unusual that they set premiere dates so far in the future, right?
No, not really.
I don't know.
No, that's 2 years.
Okay.
That's pretty normal. 1 year of one year of production, 1 year of post production. January is an interesting month though because that's a dead month after the holidays. I'm surprised that they're not releasing it more like in October of 2019 around Halloween or something like that, right? That's
might not be able to make it until then.
I guess, yeah, some scheduling things. But January is, I don't know, that's an interesting choice. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I guess they're hoping that it will be quiet and that the movie will have the whole month to itself without any big box office releases running against it. So
yeah,
I think there's less stigma now with releasing movies in these off months. Like January, February was always the dumping ground for movies, but we've seen in the last couple of years that February has had some big movies, so things might be changing. But that is an interesting release date.
Yeah, they might realize that not so many big movies are released though, so the competition isn't that hard, and
yeah,
that makes it easier to get a success.
Yeah, and I think maybe they're worried about not a lot of people will know that this is actually a sequel to The Shining. So they want to give it some space. And I still have that outstanding question about which version of The Shining will Flanagan be holding to. I know that for book purposes and story purposes for Dr. Sleep, they really need to follow, well, they don't need to, but they would have to follow the book version. But because this is being released by Warner Brothers, I wonder if they're going to put any pressure on him to make it fit in with the movie version, which of course is quite different than what happened in the book. So that's going to be interesting. And I'm hoping that somebody along the line will ask Mike that question and that we'll get an answer to that. So
yeah, hopefully we'll find out.
Because I hope they follow the book version.
I do too. Yeah. And I don't remember the King's miniseries version of The Shining. Did that ending follow the book? Because then they could always say that this one is actually a sequel to the TV show.
Oh, that's true, but I don't think
Kubrick's movie.
Yeah, but I don't think the TV show was done by Warner Brothers. But I don't know for sure. No. But that's interesting.
Yep.
So we have one last bit of news, and this is a partnership for the Chismars with Stephen King again, but this time it's not just Steve and Richard, but also Richard's son Billy, and they are working on a movie called Trapped. And I assume this will be a short film, and I don't know if it's like a Dollar Baby. I guess not. It's an original work, so it wouldn't be that. So I don't know if this is just something that's going to play in film festivals or if they're going to offer it up as a streaming service or something like that. So and
we don't know much about it really. We know
with the title of Trapped, it could be a one-person story too, right? So
yeah. And it's the story is by Stephen King and Richard Chismar, and it's written by Richard. So this could be something that they have just sat around and talked about late one night, maybe. So it may not, or probably isn't based on the Stephen King previous story, I would guess. So since the story is by King and Chismar, so I'm guessing that they come up with a story, and Richard wrote the screenplay, and Billy is making it.
Right.
That's my guess.
Yep. Very cool.
Yeah.
So that is the news.
Yes.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around, pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift.
And we are here with Ami Sandler, who is going to talk comics with us. And we haven't done this before. I don't think we've mentioned the comics very much in the podcast at all. So this time we are going to do a rundown and start from the beginning and all through the end. But Ami, please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, thank you, guys. My name is Ami Sandler. I'm calling from almost sunny Southern California here, about an hour east of Los Angeles here. I've been a Stephen King fan as far back as I can remember. I think I started reading his novels middle school, I think. Pet Sematary was my first run of the Stephen King library at that time. And from what everybody told me, it was probably one of his scariest novels he'd written up to that point. And I obviously thought it was amazing and have been a fan ever since. Not really a massive comic book fan myself growing up here, but part of kind of building my Stephen King collection was anything kind of related to the author of choice. And these comics started popping up around 2007 officially here. And so I just kind of started collecting the hardcover collection of books and every month or two bought a new one and just kind of kept them. And so kind of more of the comic book collector on the fan of the Stephen King side of it as opposed to the comic book side of it. But, after reading through some of them, I started, remembering all the stories and novels that I've read over the years, and they're pretty fantastic. It's pretty awesome. I'm an art lover. I love art and paintings and things since I have zero talent ability in that area. So it was kind of nice to enjoy the work of others that are well more gifted than I am in that. And of course, I'm reading about all the wonderful Stephen King stuff I remember reading about since I was 11, 12 years old. So it was nice to see all that again.
Yeah, and it's interesting with the comics because we have the first one is Creepshow from 1982. Right. And after that, not much happened until 2007 when The Dark Tower came. And I mean, Stephen King is a prolific writer, and it's a little bit surprising that comic hasn't been done in that space between there, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if that is something on his end. I mean, I'm assuming at some point somebody had to contact him or his people and say we have an interest in kind of taking this other genre and mixing it with your themes and your stories and novels, and so maybe there wasn't an interest on his end, or maybe it just that communication never took place until just prior to 2007. I don't know, but since 2007, there's been a ton of stuff, and I've tried to do my best to keep it organized and keep collecting as they become available. And it's not 100% complete, but I think I do have a pretty good collection here that I would love to talk to our listeners about and share what I've learned about these different amazing comic books and a little bit of their history and their artists and authors and things like that. So.
Yeah. So what's your experience with the comics, Lou?
I think I had the Creep Show when it came out. I'm not sure though. And then I lost it, so I just but fortunately it was recently reprinted, so I've gotten that one. With the Dark Tower ones, I collected the first 2 or 3 volumes, I guess, but and I think you and I have talked about this, Hans. Part of the problem with comics is they come out spread so far apart, and while each issue does have the gorgeous artwork in that, there's not a lot of story in that. So by the time you get the next issue, maybe that's not a bad thing. You basically have to start back at the beginning and reread it. So it was a frustrating experience, especially like for Stephen King readers when his books are like 500, 600 pages, to get like a 20-page thing and then wait a next month for the next one. So I think it's better to wait until like they do a collection, an omnibus, and I actually have bought all the Dark Tower ones on digital, but beyond that, the other ones that are here I haven't collected, so I'm going to be interested to hear what Ami has to say about those ones as well.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I don't know if you want to talk about the Creep Show. It's really not a comic in that respect. I think it's more like one thing deal for the movie. But the comic, it started actually already back in 2005 when there was rumors about King writing for Marvel. They actually posted something, I don't know if you remember this, but on October 27, 2005, they posted it was just a black background and the word King in yellow with a crown over it. And they didn't reveal that it was actually Stephen King. But of course, us King fans really got in line for this one. And it turned out to be the collaboration between King and Marvel for the Dark Tower comics. Did you see this teasing about King and Marvel?
I did not. I think I must have missed that, but I just happen to remember when it did finally get published in 2007. I just started picking it up there. And I think I'll mention a little bit how Lou was saying about the comics. You read 20 pages and then you wait a month and then you have to go back and kind of reread again. I just waited until each of the comic book arcs, that specific chapter in the series, whatever it's called, I just waited until it got printed as a hardcover so I could read all 5 or 6 together in a row. And then you also get the advantage of no ads like a regular comic book too. So I just waited until 2007 and then just found out about it then. So I definitely did not see that. I'm not sure if I would have put that together or even thought about the idea of Stephen King comic books since it had been over 20 plus years since Creep Show and just kind of tied into the movie at that time. So,
How about you, Lou?
I don't remember the specific moment in time when I found out about the Dark Tower comics. Maybe it was Bev Vincent posted something on the column he does at Cemetery Dance. But I was aware of the comics coming out before the first issue hit the stands. So I was definitely ready for them to come. And I was really surprised that they picked the Dark Tower out of all the properties that he had. I guess that's what started this push or renaissance for the Dark Tower to be adapted into other media, such as like either a movie or TV show as well. So it's very interesting that they picked such a large epic work to fill in some gaps with the comic books, as opposed to doing some straight up adaptations of we do have The Stand. I'm surprised that there's not a It comic adaptation, but maybe, and we would have thought after the first movie they would have done something with that as well. But I don't know, maybe the market's changed again and they're a little more cautious about taking on adaptations of novels and movies now. I'm not sure.
Yeah. As mentioned, it started all in 2005, and it was actually supposed to be released around that time, but it got delayed for 2007. One interesting thing is that I actually got to see when King was in London 2006 to promote Lizzie's story, I was invited to a publishing party where I was actually shown sketches from the first issue before it was even printed. So I had seen some images from it before it hit the stores. Then back in 2007, it was actually released. Then it was parts of the story that we hadn't read about so much before. It was actually new parts, or was it the part with Court in the first episode? I don't remember exactly, but there was parts that we hadn't seen before in there in the written books. And I think that was quite interesting. What did you think about that?
Well, I think I have to go back and look at all my notes here from all these books because there are so many of them with the Dark Tower series there. But I think I remember the first arc of those first 5 or 6 books there actually started with, I think, the Dark Tower 4. I think Wizard and Glass was sort of where the comics began, as opposed to the traditional Gunslinger book 1, how we're all used to when you start reading the series. And then it kind of went along, and then he threw in back into, Little Sisters of Illyria was there, and then the last few books from the last few years, I think, skipped all the way to the Drawing of the Three. So it was moving around a little bit, and I think maybe that was strange. I personally thought so, but because it definitely didn't just go start to finish, book 1 to 7 all the way through kind of thing, by any means.
Yeah, and as they started to release these comics, of course, they wanted to make a lot of money on them as well. So they actually did several versions of it. From the beginning, there were one trade cover, there were one sketch variant cover, and one cover that was basically a different artist doing the cover. So you have, for the first issue, you have 3 different covers. For the second, you had 2. And the third, you have 3, and the fourth, you have 2, and then you have 3 again. Oh, you have actually 4. Oh my God, what do you have 5? Oh, there's so many covers of this. Did you collect them all, or did you just get one of them, or how did you start collecting them?
I just waited until the hardcover edition came out. So that's the only bad side about the hardcover publishings that are out there. The good thing is hardcover is a lot more durable than the regular comic books. The bad thing is you don't get the alternative covers. They just, and even sometimes there would be a new cover for the actual hard copy edition. Which sometimes didn't appear on any of the comics, which was cool. But what I found is that in some of these, when you get to the end of the entire 150, 200-page book here, they'll actually include all of the covers just so you can at least see them, even though you don't have them in order with the actual books, how they're there. So you get them. It's a little bit more durable. So I didn't collecting all the different variants. I mean, gosh, like you said, you'd be piled high in comic books from floor to ceiling if you were doing that. So I just waited and did the hardcovers every 6 months or so, or 6-7 months whenever they came out, and then just tried to catch up on reading them all at the same time if I could.
Yeah, well, I have quite a pile here. So I have a lot of these issues. I think from the first 2 or 3 arcs, I actually have all the covers. Yeah, but sometimes it just gets too much.
Exactly. Yeah.
So moving on to the actual story, what did you think about The Dark Tower as a comic? Did it work?
I thought it was fine. Nothing's going to be exactly the same as any of the novels, but I mean the stories. I get so into the actual graphic novel side of it, the amazing artistic abilities and the different colors, and really just kind of put you back into the novel, put you back into a different place. And even if the characters are a little bit different than what I viewed them as so many years ago when I read these books, it was nice to get a little refresher course on what somebody else thought or what somebody's else's take was on it. And I just thought it was amazing. Even if the story wasn't exactly the same, or if it kind of went this way or that way, I was so into the beauty of the artistic side of it that just kind of went with the story, whatever direction it went in. And that was my entertainment there, almost as if it was sort of a fresh look or a new approach at the novel. Of course, Dark Tower being so expansive, hard to remember all the specific details of that anyway. So,
yeah, I remember I was a bit frustrated because one of the batches was called The Battle of Jericho Hill.
Yep.
And actually told the story King hadn't told himself. And I was thinking, wow, is he ever going to be able to write about this story now that it's out as a comic? And so far he hasn't. So I guess we'll have to find out. But, well, I enjoyed the comics. I lost interest a little bit because it took too long to get each issue. And
right.
Living where I live, it also took a long time to get them here and stuff like that. So eventually I actually lost interest in them.
Right. I think how Lou was talking about buying those omnibus publications after the fact. If you wanted to sit down with 500 pages of comics at that point, then go for it. That at least makes it, makes it nice. You can get through 5 arcs or 6 arcs and see the complete story, see all the pictures and everything. And so I think that was a good idea for them to do that. I'm curious to see if they're going to release a third one for the last 5 or 6 arcs, the drawing of the 3 series that they did the last few years here. But it's, I guess, been a year and a half or so since the last one, and it hasn't been out yet. So I don't know if that's coming soon, or maybe that's in the works. Maybe it's not. I'm not sure. So
yeah.
Okay, interesting. So you sent us an image. These are all the ones that you have, correct?
Those are all the ones that I've collected. Yes. So they're mostly, like I said, all the hardcovers are there. Creepshow is, of course, soft cover.
Yeah.
The Orbit one is soft cover. I'll talk about that in a little bit here. But most of them, like I said, I just wait until the hardcovers come out every 6 months or so, and then just try to snag them when I can, and just add them to the collection. So.
All right.
So most of them are actually still in shrink wrap. I don't know if that adds to value or not, but I've tried not to open them, or maybe some of them I have digital copies like you, Lou, so I can read them that way, and then keep the originals smelling fresh like the pages always do.
Right.
So that's what I have, and so it was nice to kind of get them all out. I hadn't looked at them all in a while, and it was pretty cool. I didn't realize I had that many actually. So.
Yeah, it kind of creeps up on you sometime.
Yeah.
I do have to say that whatever shortcomings I have with the comics type material, because when I read, I really want to immerse myself into it. But I really have to say that the artwork and the production qualities of the Dark Tower comics was pretty top-notch stuff. There's some gorgeous imagery in some of these books, and I don't know if you've made notes about any of that, or if there's a particular arc that you really enjoyed over any of the other ones. And specifically, I know Hans mentioned Battle of Jericho Hill, because we all want to see that or read that. So I'm kind of curious which arcs you liked the best.
Yeah, so, I mean, gosh, of all the ones there, I don't know if there was any one that stood out in particular of the Dark Tower series here, and of the other compilations that we'll talk about here in a little bit. I remember reading the N comic books, and I really got into those for a while, I think, just because it was a little more modern. It makes it a little bit easier to relate to sometimes, I guess, than fantasy worlds and things. And then those webisodes that came out afterwards really put it all together visually for me. So I remember reading those 4 comics and just completely fell in love with those specifically. But of the Dark Tower ones, I mean, I can't remember reading a specific arc and thought it wasn't good, but there may not have been, any one that kind of stood out as being the best of the best, because like you said, the artistic ability, the graphics and images are just so amazing. They're just all good to me. And I was just happy to get a new one every 6 months and catch up on the last 5-6 plus episodes and read those books all together, and it was just a really good experience every time.
I remember being a little bit annoyed by them changing the artist, the characters looking different from arc to arc. I don't know, that bothered me a bit. I don't know.
You're just not a comic book reader, man. That they do that all the time with other comics.
Yeah, I know, and I'm not a comic. I was when I was smaller, when I was a kid. Well, that bothered me a little bit, but not that much though. I think the thing that got me uninterested in them is as we have been talking about earlier, that they are released too far in between, and the same thing happened to me. I read the Walking Dead comic. When I started reading that, I got some big omnibus with like 100 issues in them or something like that. So I read all that and I loved it. And after that, I had to read a single issue that was released once a month, and I just lost interest in it. They don't have the time to build the story.
Right. It definitely makes it harder. Absolutely.
Yeah. But it seems like they have given up on the Dark Tower now. The last batch ended in early 2017, so it's almost a year and a half, or just over a year. I haven't heard anything more about other issues coming. Have you heard any more?
I have not. No, I haven't heard anything on that end. I think there have been all the other comic collections out there that I have that we can chat about. But as far as Dark Tower, I haven't heard a single thing. No.
So we'll see what happens with that one. About the same time as the Dark Tower came, we also got a comic version of The Stand. And this one, I think, was more, it was based on the book, so it was closer to the book.
Yep.
And this was also it didn't stray from the book. It started with the book and ended with the book, so it was just an adaptation of the book.
Right.
And personally, I enjoy this one more than The Dark Tower, and I think it was a good version of the book. Did you both read it?
I did, yeah, and I agree with you there. I think because it does follow the book a little bit cleaner than the Dark Tower series was just all over the place. But this one, I think there were 6 arcs, 5 books each, so about 30 total, or six arcs. I think the last one had 6 books, so about 31 books or so. I did follow the storyline fairly well, and that made it a little bit easier to get through them all. What I found interesting, sometimes going back and looking at these, we know it's based on the novels we've all read, and we're all Stephen King fans, but I like to go back and learn a little bit more about if there's any other authors that have contributed or how the artists are somehow associated. And for the Stan comics, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, if I'm pronouncing that right, so he contributed to helping with the comic books as well. And then several years later, he ends up writing the screenplay for the remake of Carrie in 2013. So he had that connection with Stephen King back earlier, back in 08, 9, 10, 11, 2011, when this one finished up. And then 2 years later, he helped make that movie. So it was, I always find that interesting too, to kind of go back and look
pretty
at,
cool.
Look at the authors or look at the artists and just see how they end up coming back into the mix years later thing. But I thought it was great. We followed most of the themes of the book, all the main characters, Randall Flagg, Mother Abigail, all the survivors, they're all there and all about them. And then, of course, the big omnibus at the end, which puts them all together in a fancy package and makes it real nice to read. So, I definitely enjoyed it.
Cool. I haven't read this version, so I'm curious, what do you two guys think about the artwork of this series compared to The Dark Tower?
I'm trying to remember specifically here. I'd have to go back if I could pull that book over here and take a look. I mean, it's great. I think I don't know. I think it was just easier to, I don't know, I guess, maybe seeing a picture of Randall Flagg, we all have how this guy's going to look. And we saw the TV series back in the day, but I guess it's just a little different when you finally see this mysterious dark figure in print. And I think I remember reading this thinking, man, that guy's as scary as I thought he was all this time. I thought it was great. I thought the art was good, really captured the ideas and the themes of the book. And it was fun to go back and relive it I think I read The Stand twice now. So this would have been the 3rd time going through the storyline. And yeah, I thought it was wonderful and I definitely enjoyed it. Yeah,
I agree. I actually like this one more than The Dark Tower. I think it feels cleaner than The Dark Tower one. Also, I have to say that Mike Perkins, who's the illustrator of this comic, was actually kind enough to include Lilja's library in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I actually missed that one myself. So a friend told me that, you have to read the new comic. Lilja's library is in it. So I read it, and I still couldn't find it. There's actually a sign above a car where it says Lilja's library. So that's really cool.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Cool. You're immortalized. How awesome.
Yep. Yeah.
So does this version, it's just the original, based on the original cut of the novel, or does it include anything for the uncut edition as well?
I don't remember. Actually, that's a good question. I'd have to go back and kind of look at some of those specific books there. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, it's based on the original version.
I think so.
But I'm not 100% sure about it. And I actually did I'm looking at my site as we speak here, and I actually did the Stand week on Lilja's library, where I interviewed a lot of people involved with the issues, Roberto among others. So it was an interesting comic. I actually think this one is the best one so far that's been made into a comic.
Well, you guys have convinced me I'm going to have to pick this up somehow.
It's worth the read. It's worth the read. Yeah, you'll like it.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, and moving on. They also did a comic version of The Talisman. And this one was actually quite short. I think it just had a couple of issues. I have to look it up to see exactly how many. And I think the problem with this one was that it didn't sell very good. It had actually 5 issues. In 2010, early. And then it just vanished. I remember having some contact with the publisher who released them, and they said, they're coming more, it's coming more, and stuff like that. But it never did. And so this comic didn't really go anywhere. I think that, I don't know, I think the illustration was a bit strange. It wasn't really my type of illustration, to be honest, the style of it. But maybe it could have been something if it had gotten a chance to run a little bit longer.
Yeah, I agree. I think from what I remember, I'm just kind of glancing through it right now. It was a little different style. slightly different style here. And I think if I remember, I think this was the one that it actually started with issue 0. Like normally when you get a new comic, it starts with issue 1. I think I remember this was issue 0, and I think they gave it out at Comic Cons or somehow they were promoting it that way. And then it started with issue 1, which was really the second book. So I don't know if that had anything to do with maybe why it didn't sell so well. It sounds like maybe it was promoted a little bit differently back then in 2010. So I don't know if that had an impact or not. Not sure, but I mean, it was, I mean, I enjoyed it. I wish there would have been more, like you mentioned, but it did just had our 6 books, our 5-6 books, and that was it. And then that's it. There's no more.
That's so frustrating when that happens.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, but I as far as I know, the reason is that it didn't sell at all.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the covers right now, and just by looking at the covers, you can't really believe that this is from the same comic. I mean, from the first issue, you have one that's in a very lifelike style. You see a boy from behind, and then if you look at the variant cover, it's really comic. It looks like Dennis the Menace or something like that. So and then if you look at next issue, it looks like something more maybe in the style of the Dark Tower.
Yeah.
And for the next issue, there's like almost like a photo of a woman. So I mean, it doesn't really looks like there's a red thread going through all these issues. It's going everywhere. It feels like now that you see all these covers. So I don't know if that also was contributing to not selling.
Right. Could have been. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess you didn't read this one, Lou?
No, I the only ones I've read are Creepshow and Dark Tower.
Ah, okay. So next up was N, and this is actually an original story King did. It was released as, I don't know if it was released as a comic first or if it was released like just some still photos.
I think if I remember here, I think it was part of Just After Sunset, and I think that was 2008. And I remember at the time I purchased out here in the United States, we had a collector's edition available, no signatures or anything, but it had an alternative Just jacket, which is like the variant cover for the comics here. But I remember that it had a DVD with it. First time I've ever seen one of King's books that came with the DVD, and it had all of these, these little 1 minute long episodes of the end story here. So I think I remember that these sort of the animated webisodes or whatever the term is here, I think they came out first. And then I think then the comic came out, I think a couple years later, maybe 2010 or something like that. So it was like, here's the visual, the actual cartoony version that you've seen on your television. And then now we're going to put it into print a couple of years later. So I think that's how that one ended up.
Yeah, I remember getting like emails for the webisodes. Yep.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. And I think they're all on iTunes. And I think I did buy them. I think iTunes put them in packs of 5. So you at least got 5-minute videos or 5 or 6 minute videos instead of getting all excited and then 60 seconds later you had to wait another week or something. So at least they put them in episodes of 5 at a time. And then if you bought all 5, then you had your 25 episodes and you had the whole story. So
yeah. So, but this one was a new story, or it was actually not. It was based on the short movies. Was like comics, right?
It was. It was.
Yeah, animated comics.
Yeah, it wasn't a cartoon. It wasn't fully animated, but it was almost like moving graphics, moving pictures. Caption boxes, moving up, moving down, left and right, that kind of stuff. So it's like the intermediary between just static pictures and then moving cartoons, of course. But so sort of right in the middle there. But I still found it totally entertaining. I loved it. I thought the concept was good. The sound, I remember seeing those webisodes thinking, man, the sound is just so awesome. It's like I'm standing in this field and I feel this monster and all these weird things happening just because it had such a cool soundtrack to it. I remember that being a big part of it.
Yeah. But then you have almost read that one, Lou, at least in the films.
Yeah, I've seen the webisodes, for sure.
Yeah, they're pretty true to the comic. It's almost, not necessarily identical, but it's very, very close.
Yeah.
It's almost as if you can imagine somebody, maybe when they made the comic later, taking the still shots of the webisodes and then just turning them into pages and doing it that way. So, so
right.
it was well done.
Yeah.
those are the ones that are based on King's stories. And we have some other quite different things. If we start with American Vampire,
Okay.
that is actually a story that King was involved in writing the story for, right?
He was. He wrote that with Scott Snyder. And so, again, I did my little homework here trying to figure out did Scott Snyder come from and all that. And he had a little bit of background doing comics and some short stories and things. But it looks like that was a short run. There may have only been one cycle that he actually wrote that with Scott Snyder. And then Scott continued and did further series after that at that point. So the only ones I collected were the ones that King was part of actually writing with him. And I think it was only the first 4 books. So it wasn't too many. It was kind of neat. It was the idea of, I think, 2 storylines. One was Snyder's, one was King's, and King's was a Wild Wild West version of what this cool vampire, stronger, faster than anybody else had any seen before, how that was integrated to the other storyline where Snyder wrote about a young woman living in the 20s, got turned into a vampire against her will, and now she's out on a course of revenge and all that. And so it was interesting to see those 2 storylines bouncing back and forth and stuff. And then I think I remember reading too that this one actually won some either 1 or 2 comic book awards in 2011, which I don't know. I don't know exactly how hard that is to get comic book awards if it's, because there's so many comics out there. But I do remember reading something about how this was recognized as winning kind of awards. And it was, I guess it was a big deal back in 2011.
Yeah, that's correct. It did win an award. And I exactly as you did, I was just interested in the episodes that King was involved in. But I actually liked this one. It was pretty good story, and I remember at the time I almost wish he would be involved in it longer.
Right. No, I liked it too. Yeah, I thought it was a cool thing, and I mean, I'm not going to turn down Stephen King and vampires because he's had some pretty good history with that. So so let's write about it some more, right? And we got a little taste of it here, but it would have been nice to have a little more. So.
Yeah. Well, that explains the cover, because I've always looked at that and I said, why is that woman? She doesn't look like she's in the same time period as the cowboys.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
As
exactly.
soon as you said that, it looks like a flapper, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So now I understand that there was more than one storyline. But I always looked at the cover and said, these two things don't really go together.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And next up is actually a collaboration between Stephen King and Joe Hill, his son. They wrote the story called Road Rage, which is actually a tribute to, what's his name?
Duel.
Yeah,
by
exactly.
Richard Matheson.
Yeah, Richard Matheson, I believe. Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and then they turned that one into a comic. I don't remember exactly how many issues of this it was. I think there were like 4 or 5.
This was short too. Yeah, maybe 3-4 books or something. Not too many, I don't believe.
No. And this was also just a straight adaptation of the story, so they didn't draw it out or anything like that.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's about it. Motorcycles and the father-son relationship and all kinds of issues they get into, and it is what it was. It wasn't the best, but I don't think it was the worst, and it was fun to see that collaboration with Joe Hill as well, and it's nice to see them working together. So
yeah. And the last one we have is actually quite special because that is not based on something from Stephen King. It's actually a comic about Stephen King, right?
It is, yeah. So this was, I think this is actually right before the Road Rage came out. I think this was June of 2011. I have to check the date on that. I'm not sure, but it's called Orbit, and I hadn't even heard of the Orbit comics. So I did a little background there, and it looks like they were series of comic books, like biography series, where they would focus on different people. Each episode was on a different person who's made some kind of difference in the world for a positive way. And this issue specifically was all about Stephen King. So it's like you said, it's like a behind the scenes look at the author himself. It's not about one of his stories. It's about Mr. Stephen King, and it's about how he grew up and how he met Tabitha and how he got married. And I learned for the first time that he had punctured eardrums, had issues with that when he was younger. So it was pretty cool. It was fun to see a comic book version of himself. I wonder if this is one of those things where they had to get his approval or get the okay and say, hey, is this good enough for you, or do we need to change it? Is this good before we print? I don't know how that works once they pick the author for each episode, or for each book. But I thought it was hysterical. It was so fun to read through that and get a personal look at the guy behind the typewriter all those years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool cover, I have to say. I'm pretty sure it's based on a picture of him when he's, I think, in his early 20s, looking up
Right.
from his typewriter, but they've Norman Rockwelled it.
Right.
And it's actually a pretty cool cover. I really like it.
Yeah. And I remember actually I got this comic, and I remember it was very delayed because I was in talk with the publisher and they were going to get it, and it
Right,
got delayed and stuff
I
like
remember that
that.
too.
So yeah, I think that they would get King's approval for this one. I'm not sure they need it because he's public figure, so I guess they could do it without his approval. But I mean, if he would say no to it, I would guess that that would draw down the sales very much. So I think they actually talked to him about it.
Right. No, I think I'm sure he definitely had at least some knowledge of what's happening and everything. And they get into the detail about his accident in 1999 where he gets hit by the van. And gosh, I remember seeing that page saying, "Oh my God, that is so much blood on that page there." You could barely even see it's his face. And I'm sure he would have had to get at least maybe an okay on that specifically. I don't know, but I mean, we all know what happened with that and how he recovered and everything. But that was pretty traumatic. But I remember seeing that page going, man, that makes it look even even worse than it could have been, as if it could get any worse. I mean, gosh, that's just yeah.
Okay, I think that those are the comics that are out there, right?
I think so. The only other one that is potentially out there, as far as in print, yes. The only other one that's out there is he did a little something called The Green God of Agony. I think it was in 2012.
Right. Yeah,
so it was never printed. I think I remember seeing where he would send out emails or something saying I don't know how often they came out, if it was every day or every week or something, maybe every few days. You would get a link, you could go to his website and you could see, I think each page was considered an episode or something. So, it was like 20 something pages, it would be just one comic book. And so I don't think it was ever printed unless I'm wrong, but it was like just the digital version of that.
Right. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's actually one more or two more that just remembered now. One is he did one page for a Marvel comic. That was for charity. I think a lot of writers did one page each, wrote the story for it. So that one is out there. I don't remember exactly what his name was. I should have looked that up. And the other is there was actually a comic version of The Lawn Mover Man.
Oh yeah, that's
done
right.
a long time ago.
Right.
That's really funny. It's in black and white, I think.
It is. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
So that one is out there as well. But I think that's it. Is there anyone that you prefer to see as a comic?
Just as far as his other novels turned into a comic, gosh, I don't know. Well, I'd have to go back. I've so many choices. If he would, if he wasn't still writing 2-3 books a year at his age, that'd be a lot easier of a question. Gosh, I mean, what a great problem to have. I have so many choices. I can't decide. I think you mentioned about it. I think that would just be amazing. We all have our thoughts of what a scary clown looks like. And when we've seen the TV show and of course the movie, and I know the second one's filming soon. So that would probably be phenomenal, I'm sure. Yeah, I don't know, man. That's a really good question. I'd have to go back and look and try and visualize that. I don't know.
Yeah, I could think of a couple off the top of my head. For some of the short stories, I think like The Raft would be awesome. The Long Walk would be good. Yeah. And I think Salem's Lot also, because it's got that atmospheric small town thing going on with the vampires. So those would be 3 of the ones that I could think of off the top of my head.
Yeah. I think most of them could actually work as comics.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. They all could,
right?
Yeah.
But, so I'm trying to think of the ones that would really. I think the shorter works, again, when you're adapting his material to the movies. I think the shorter works work better because then you don't have to cut out so much. And if they're long, then it's better to go to TV miniseries format. But
yeah.
True.
Just to be doing things right here, I just want to add that the Lawn Mover Man is from Bizarre Adventures number 29. That one was released in 1981.
Wow.
I would recommend you to check that one out. It's really cool, actually.
It's based on the book version, right? Not the movie version?
Yep. Yeah. This was way before the movie was even done. So this is based on his story. So you can imagine what happens in it. And The Marvel one that I was mentioning is actually a comic called Heroes for Hope
Oh, okay.
that was released in 1985 to raise awareness of hunger in Africa.
Oh, very cool.
Nice.
A few notable authors from outside the comic book industry, such as Stephen King, George R.R. Martin, and Edward Bryant, was involved in doing that one. So
Okay.
I think he did a couple of pages. I think the layout for it was each person did a couple of pages for it.
Cool.
Nice.
They did the plot for it, and then
Right.
not doing the drawings.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are worth checking out as well.
Ami, was there anything that you wanted to mention that we haven't, that just hasn't come up in the natural flow of conversations about any of the comics you got?
Maybe just one last thing for all of our constant listeners and King constant readers out there. When I started collecting these, I always thought, man, there's got to be some way to keep them all organized and, you know, try and see if I'm getting them all, if I'm missing something. And that's when I noticed on Stephen King's website, he actually has, or had, I guess it's not updated anymore, but there was always a little link up in the top right of the main tabs up there. And there was 3 letters, IPT. And I was always wondering, oh gosh, what is that? So I clicked on it one day, and it goes to another part of his website called the Illustrated Publishing Tracker. And it was basically his website or his moderator. I don't know if Miss Maud was doing this or somebody was, but they were actually doing exactly what we're doing now, going back and keeping track of all the comics and the arcs and all that stuff. But it looks like that stopped as of sometime in mid 2014 or something. Just about 4 years ago, they stopped updating that. So I don't know who was responsible for that, but gosh, I thought that was very valuable information on all the comics that were out there. And then it just stopped being updated. It's still on his site today. You can see it, and it just goes everything up through 2014, but it just stopped being updated. So I don't know if that means there's nothing new happening in the long run kind of thing, or are we out of luck? Is this it as far as comics? I don't know. Maybe that'll start getting updated again if we start to see new future comics out there. I have no idea, but I wasn't sure if you guys even had ever seen that before, or if you knew that was there.
No, I never thought to click on that.
Yeah. I did it by accident one day.
Yeah, I had actually looked at it, and here's my bad conscience talking now. I have a comic section on my site that is quite poorly updated. So I was planning to update it, and I actually found their page, and it was good information. But I haven't gotten around to updating mine yet. But if you go to my site, you have actually a headline saying comics, and you have the Dark Tower, the Stand, the Talisman, and the American Vampire comics. Okay. And I've actually posted photos of all the covers for it. But I go like 7 arcs on the Dark Tower. I think the Stand is complete. Talisman is probably complete, and Vampire is complete, I think. So the Dark Tower has to be completed. Right. And one day I might do that. But I posted all the covers there because I wanted to, I collected them from the beginning, so I have most of them. And I did it mostly to keep track of every cover there were. There's very many covers if you want to check them out.
Oh, yeah. There are a bunch.
Yeah. So I think that's bringing us to the end about comics.
Appreciate your guys' time. I remember hearing your podcast several episodes back where you guys had that gentleman on about the soundtracks, and I thought that's something super cool that maybe not a lot of people are gonna get too excited about. But so I don't know if the comic books is in the same realm of that, but hopefully your listeners can get a different side of the Stephen King novels and ideas and stories, and maybe go out and check them out. So
yeah, that's quite true. Me and Hans were talking about that before we came on. That we haven't really talked about the comics too much, and I had never really seen anybody else, any other King-related material, talking about the comics either. So thank you very much for stepping forward, and we really appreciate it. And if other fans are out there that have other things that they're collecting from King that we haven't talked about, feel free to chuck them our way, and so we'll take a look at it, see if it's something that we can fit into the podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and if anyone out there listening has any comments about the comics, you know where to send them, or even better, send a voice message. It was very long since we had a voice message, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So all the listeners out there, we do need a voice message so that we know that version or that thing is still working.
Yeah.
I think for your sake, it could be good to have a break from just hearing us. You did get a break today with Ami being joining us here.
I'm trying to help everybody out, right?
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
So send in a voice message and tell us what you think about the comics, and if there's a special comic that you would like to see done.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate it, guys. Keep up the great work.
Okay.
Hey, thank you very much for coming on. It's nice to meet you.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And there we are. That's it for this episode. And I think we did a pretty good job being away for a while for this one. So please comment on what your experience is of King's comics. If you like them, if you read them, or if you just ignore them. And
or do you wait for them all to come out in omnibuses?
yeah. So tell us. We really want to know, because comics aspect is not very often discussed. So let us know what you think.
Right.
And next time we have a great guest with us. We are going to sit down and talk with Steven Spignesi, who is going to tell us all about his new book and his older books. Anything else we can throw at him. So that's definitely going to be an interesting interview that you don't want to miss.
That's right. His new book is called Stephen King, American Master. So look forward to that. And as always,
stay scared.
No.
Try
again.
Stay safe.
But
stay scared.
There you go.
Oh, man.
Bool. It's been a while. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.